Hey everyone, Pastor George here for today's Apologetics Wednesday Theolog, and I'm here to tell you to not drink the Kool-Aid because today we are going to look at the People's Temple. So, what is the People's Temple? Well, you've probably heard of it. You probably got the reference to it in my little opening right there, which is that this is the cult that was famous for its mass suicide down in Jonestown in Guyana. Some time ago, and the assassination of a U.S. Senator, I believe, or a congressman. I think it was a senator. Anyway, you've probably heard this story before. It's one of the most commonly told stories about cults in the United States. It was the single largest, I think, American civilian death until 9/11 or whatever because of the American civilians that killed themselves down there. So numerous documentaries, TV specials, movies have been made about Jonestown and will be continued to be made about Jonestown because it's such a eerie and interesting thing to most of us. But what I'm here to talk about is not Jonestown because that's been done to death, but rather to talk about how it came to that, right? How do people get led there? What were the teachings of the People's Temple? And how did it morph from never really being Christianity, but a Christian draped organization into being what it was at the end there? So first we have to talk about Jim Jones, most famously the leader of the People's Temple, the one who Jonestown is named after. Now he began to be active in the 1950s in the wake of the Red Scare, and he was a communist, and so he really believed in the tenets of Marxism and stuff like that. And he has a quote where he says, I decided, how can I demonstrate my Marxism? The thought was infiltrate the church. So I consciously made a decision to look into that prospect. So he didn't really believe in Christianity, but he saw that the church had a hold on the culture, had something to say to the culture. And so he went, how am I going to do it? I'll infiltrate the church and I'll speak as a pastor from that point. And so he starts a church in Indianapolis, and it's pretty successful. He's a very charismatic guy, and he takes steps that are, for good, I think, way ahead of his time, right? He's integrationist, big time integrationist, especially in a more rural part of Indiana, and he's combining people of different races into churches. He and his family themselves show this as adopting children from all sorts of different races, right? He lives out the Marxist idea of this worldwide belief that all humans are together. And he cloaks all of these things in religious language when he talks about it, right? He constantly appeals to the figure of Jesus as a Marxist figure, right? As someone who cared about the poor, and that was the center. But what people started to notice is that he didn't really have that many things to say about Christianity itself. And so it was kind of interesting. He described the Christianity as what he called a fly-away religion, right? As a religion that was focused on the hereafter, right? And so it didn't care about the present. And he most likely believed this was purposeful, right? To keep the masses tamed or whatever. He wrote a book called The Letter Killeth, which was all about the contradictions and atrocities and absurdities in the Bible, and how the Bible did have great truths, but it was used as this way to keep people down, especially minorities and women and stuff like that. And his divine principles, he called it, was love, and that love equated with socialism. And he referred to the God of the Bible as a sky god or a buzzard god, right? As this person who was just interested in death and was far removed from humanity. So you actually kind of see, even in this very atheistic Marxism type thing, even this idea of the God of the Bible being evil is not something new, right? We had that with Marcion all the way back in the beginning of the church, basically. Not the beginning, but a few centuries afterward. And of course, he also gets political with these things. So he declares that the United States is the Antichrist and that capitalism is an Antichrist system, right? So he begins to mix Marxism and Christianity very heavily with, if it was, let's say it was a a Jack and Coke, and Marxism was the Jack, and Christianity was the Coke, it would be heavy on the Jack, light on the Coke. It was mainly Marxism with just a little bit of sweetness to make the average person think that they were in a church. And so it was really powerful. And so he would travel to around and he would preach this idea of religious communalism, and he would look at certain passages in the Bible, like New Testament passages about the disciples holding things in common, and he would say, listen, this is what we're all supposed to be like, and this is what society is supposed to be like, and this is the good part of the Bible. Because he wouldn't necessarily like to go out and state that he was a Marxist, right? Because it was not a good time for people to say that. And so he would just kind of cloak it in this religious communalism, what he called it. You know, Marxism has this idea of that religion is the opiate of the people. So think of him as I think this is a quote that someone said, maybe his wife or something, can't remember. But like he used the opiate to get people out of the opiate, essentially. And it was not a big fan. I remember one of the documentaries I watched, kind of the wake-up moment for some people is when he took a Bible and he threw it. And he was like, this is a paper idol or whatever, and he threw it. So it's this idea that we don't care about the Bible, right? It's a thing. And so they end up moving to California and get very involved with politics there. Famous political leaders like Harvey Milk, and even correspond with President Jimmy Carter and his wife and stuff like that. Very involved in left-wing politics. And I think what's important is this one quote that kind of sums up Jim Jones, and this is kind of where I'll end it before I give you my takeaway, where he says, what you need to believe in is what you can see. What you need to believe in is what you can see. If you see me as your friend, I'll be your friend. If you see me as your father, I'll be your father, for those of you that don't have a father. If you see me as a savior, I'll be your savior. If you see me as your God, I'll be your God. And he did actually eventually kind of get some other things in there where he would talk about how he was a reincarnation of Gandhi or Jesus or Lenin or all these things. And you're going to see this as a common trope moving forward, is this idea of being a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And of course, this ends with everyone going to Jonestown and killing themselves. And so how does that happen, right? And why do I want to bring this up, and why does it have something important to teach us today? Well, it goes to show that people can use Christian language for any ideology, right? The Bible is full, right? It's huge. You can find a backup for anything here, and if you're charismatic or knowledgeable enough, you can make people believe it, which is why one of my greatest gifts I can give you guys is, yes, teaching out of it, but really handing you the Bible, showing you the passages where I'm going from, and letting you explore them for yourselves, right? This is the big thing about Protestantism is, yes, everyone becomes a Bible interpreter, but everyone sees the text, right? It's not some incredibly autocratic strong man at the front interpreting this huge book for you, right? You have to do it as well. And so that's how it happens, right? And people today do the same thing. We put a lot of trust in our religious leaders, and many religious leaders are guided by principles that are not necessarily out of the Bible. Whether you want to say it's like the capitalism of like the prosperity preachers, or like the Marxism of some people in our denomination or other kind of more progressive denominations, right? You need to be very careful of these things, and it is something that still happens today. And so we need to always make sure that we're checking ourselves by the Bible, lest we be led astray by wolves in sheep's clothing and find ourselves drinking Kool-Aid in a South American jungle. All right, everyone. I know this one was a little long, but I know this one's kind of a fan favorite for people who are into cults. So I will see you guys tomorrow for Culture Thursdays. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.